Day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Limassol in Cyprus on April 8th, 2026. I left Iran 8 days ago on March 31st after having spent 11 days there. In that time, I traveled from Bandar Abbas on the 31st all the way to Tehran on a train, and then from Tehran to the Turkish border by bus and minivan, and then from the Turkish border to the predominantly Kurdish city in eastern Turkey of Van. That was about an hour's taxi drive. The next day I took a plane to Ankara, and then the following day I took a plane to Istanbul, then to Athens, and then to Chania on the northern coast of Crete to report on what was happening to the extent I could determine it at the Suda Bay Naval Base. I spent 3 days in Crete and then traveled through Athens to Larnaca on the southern coast of Cyprus a couple of days ago, and promptly upon my arrival here, I came to Limassol. Needless to say, after the intensity of this voyage or set of voyages, I'm a little worn out. As you can see, I'm wearing wrinkled clothing. Although it's clean, I can't find the time or space to iron it. And part of the problem, it's not just the intensity of the travel schedule, but it's that events are moving so damn quickly that it's extremely hard to keep up. And you have to, when you're doing anti-imperialism journalism, anti-imperialist journalism in extraordinary circumstances such as these, you have to pick your stories, especially because I don't have a large staff. I do have a team, but it's a small team, and we have to be selective about what we decide to cover. And that in and of itself is a process and time-consuming, deciding what it is that merits the most attention, given the focus of our journalism. And there's no question this morning that what merits most of our attention is this ceasefire deal that the Iranian government and the Trump regime appear to have struck within the past 24 hours. Now, before I talk about that deal, I'd like to say a little bit about how we got here. Several days ago, there was a humiliation for the United States military in the province of Isfahan. One of the stories I wanted to cover and really dig into was what actually happened in that so-called rescue mission, where two U.S. military C-130 aircraft were destroyed, and apparently up to 4 Apache helicopters were destroyed. Several other helicopters were destroyed. An F-15 was downed. That's what started the whole ball rolling, according to the Americans. It was downed in the airspace over Isfahan province. An A-10 aircraft was destroyed, and there may have been others as well. The claim made by the Trump regime was that all of this military hardware and hundreds of soldiers, that's what Trump himself said in a press conference, were sent to recover a pilot who, according to the U.S. military, was grievously wounded, but nevertheless managed to climb up to a high ridge, was in contact the entire time with the U.S. military. And in order to extract this one human being from these perilous circumstances, they decided to risk the lives of hundreds of soldiers. I never believed it for 1 second. My operating assumption is that when the Trump regime, or indeed any Western regime, says something that is that promotes its own agenda and that is not backed up by any independent, credible evidence, I just assume they're lying. I don't purport to know what the truth is, but I assume they're lying. And I think that that's the rational assumption, given the record of these people and the character or lack thereof that they have shown themselves to have. In any case, this notion that these two C-130 aircraft became stuck somehow. We were first told that they were lodged in some sand and they couldn't take off. Then we were told that they suffered a technical malfunction. Somehow, magically, two C-130s suffered a technical malfunction at the same time. Wow, if that's true, then they need to up their maintenance programs in the U.S. Air Force. But I doubt very much that that's true. I accept that this was probably a cover story for a larger military operation, perhaps designed to seize the enriched uranium, which there was reason to believe was being stored, at least in part, if not entirely, in Isfahan province. But whatever the ultimate objective may have been, by any rational measure, this was a terrible failure for the American military. And why do I say that? Well, they admitted that many of these aircraft were destroyed. Larry Johnson estimates that the purchase value of all of the various aircraft that were destroyed in this mission is approximately $400 million. And we know that a pilot was grievously wounded because the U.S. military admitted as much. And there may have been other casualties, although they denied it. I would imagine there were, in fact, other wounded and possibly also KIA on this mission. But even if we just take them at face value, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of military hardware lost, a pilot seriously wounded, and that's what they've admitted. And what did they gain as a result of that? Well, their answer is we gained the salvation of the life of our pilot. Well, first of all, there's no reason to believe that the Iranians would have killed him if he didn't resist. They may well have turned him over to the Americans for something of value in exchange. But in addition, whether or not that's true, they've never disclosed what the mission of the pilot was. Why was that pilot flying over the airspace of Iran? And did the pilot, in fact, accomplish his mission, whatever it may have been? We've been given no information about that as far as I know. And so there's nothing on the positive side of the ledger. There's no military benefit to the mission that he undertook, which according to the U.S. military led to this, massive loss of military hardware. But on the negative side of the ledger, we know that they lost some very expensive aircraft, and one of their pilots was seriously wounded. So there's no straight-faced, serious way you could characterize this as any kind of a victory for the United States military. It was a tactical defeat, at a bare minimum, a very costly and pointless enterprise, and possibly much more important military defeat, depending upon what the ultimate objective was of this entire venture. So this is the background, and coming into this background, I should also, of course, mention the Strait of Hormuz has been closed, for about 5 weeks. The 20% of the world's oil and gas supply typically passes through the Strait of Hormuz, and that the global economy is teetering on the brink of collapse, to put it mildly. And so in that context, Trump issues yesterday, as we covered in an episode of Reason to Resist a few hours ago, the most genocidal utterance we have seen, not only from Trump, but in my memory, from any Western leader in my lifetime. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but as you can see here, he even highlighted in red, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. He is threatening extinction to a civilization, not to a military force, not to a regime, as they call it, not to a small set of people within Iranian society, but he's threatening the extinction of all of Iranian society, the civilization, its history, its culture, its educational institutions, its accumulated knowledge over millennia of existence, its children, its cultural artifacts, everything. That's what goes into a civilization. And the language he chose left no doubt that he was threatening genocide against the Iranian people. Well, we wake up this morning after the deadline passed for the Iranians to capitulate, and their primary demand of the Trumpster was that they open up the Strait of Hormuz. And what do we find? We find that the Donald is announcing that he has entered into a 2-week ceasefire. And this is what Donald Trump had to say at 6:32 p.m. his time yesterday. Based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran, and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives, and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. These are absolutely critical words. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States of America's president, also representing the countries of the Middle East, it is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I just want to highlight some aspects of this statement. First of all, he characterizes his decision not to bring extinction upon the Iranian civilization as having resulted from a request from the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So he wants to characterize himself as being the beneficent, all-powerful Donald Trump who heeds the admonitions of his respectful vassals. One thing he left out of this is that this 10-point proposal was put on the table quite some time ago. It's not as though he would like us to believe, evidently, that at the very last minute, in a fit of desperation, the Iranians cobbled together a 10-point peace plan. Then they told the leaders of Pakistan, please tell Mr. Trump to wait so that we can give him the peace plan and the 10-point proposal and an opportunity to consider it. And at that point, Donald Trump acceded to a delay, and he refrained from committing genocide against the Iranian people. Well, the key issue here, the key point is that this 10-point proposal was in Donald Trump's hands for quite some time, and he could have accepted it days ago. So, and by the way, there's a very interesting video that Ryan Grimm of Dropsite News put out on TikTok, where before all of this unfolded, where he basically, suggested to the Trump regime that he do exactly this, that he accept the 10-point proposal and pretend that it was new, sort of like, Bobby Kennedy and JFK did during the Cuban Missile Crisis when they accepted a proposal from Khrushchev that Khrushchev had already rescinded. They just pretended that the new proposal didn't exist. In any case, whether or not Donald Trump was influenced by Ryan Grimm's ingenious message, the fact of the matter is that 10-point proposal did exist well before this fake deadline passed last night. And so what's really happened here, folks, is that there has been a massive capitulation on the part of Donald Trump. Whatever happens to this 2-week ceasefire, however seriously negotiations are pursued, and I, of course, have many doubts about that, as I'm sure you do. We'll get into that some more in a moment. The deadline has passed, the one he set, on pain of extinction, and the Strait of Hormuz has not been opened. Not only that, but the missiles apparently continue to fly. So this is, by any stretch of the imagination, another case of Donald Trump blinking at the 11th hour. And it's not hard to see why. His popularity has plummeted. U.S. military bases have been demolished throughout the Persian Gulf. Israel is having its ass handed to it by Hezbollah and the Iranian military. The price of oil is soaring. You name it. I've only covered some of the soft spots for the Donald at this particularly perilous moment for his presidency. So it's not at all surprising, but to really understand the scope and nature of the capitulation, we need to look at the 10-point peace proposal. I'm going to do that in just a second. One other thing I want to say here is the language he chose is qualified, to put it mildly. He says that we received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. So it's a proposal from Iran. He believes, he's not saying it is a workable basis, but he believes it's a workable basis. The word workable in itself leaves a lot of wiggle room. And also the word basis leaves a lot of wiggle room. So this may very well go nowhere, but whether or not that happens, whether it goes nowhere, and let's hope that it actually becomes a long-term peace, the fact is that he let the deadline pass even though Iran had not capitulated to his demands. So let's take a look at the 10-point proposal. This is from Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera, and it was published yesterday after Trump's Truth Social post about the ceasefire. And this is consistent with other reports I have seen about the 10-point proposal. So first of all, coordinated passage through the Strait of Hormuz with Iranian forces, boosting Iran's economic and geopolitical leverage. I think that's Al Jazeera's characterization. But yeah, if the passage through the Strait of Hormuz has to be coordinated with Iranian forces, that means they're going to continue to control who goes through it and on what terms. Second, end the war against all elements of the axis of resistance. That's not just Hezbollah, my friends. It's not just Iraqi militia, nor is it just Ansarallah. It is also the Palestinian resistance groups. Number three, the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from all bases and deployment points in the region. Wow. Number four, the establishment of safe transit protocol in the Strait of Hormuz in a way that guarantees Iran's dominance according to the agreed terms. So this sounds to me very much like we are going to extract a price, a toll, for the passage of vessels through the region, through the Strait of Hormuz. And, you know, given the value of the cargo and the number of ships that typically pass through there before this criminal war of aggression on Iran, we're talking about a lot of dough. You know, this could just become a huge additional source of revenue on top of Iran's revenue from the sale of its oil and gas. And then full payment of Iran's damages according to estimates. Full payment. When has the United States ever made any reparations in recent memory to a state to which it's subjected to aggression? Then the lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions, as well as resolutions of the Board of Governors and the Security Council. So Iran's economy would finally be given, for the first time since the Islamic Revolution, full space to breathe and to flourish. And then the release of all Iranian assets and properties frozen abroad. And finally, the ratification of these matters in a binding Security Council resolution. I think we can fairly describe these demands as maximalist. In other words, I mean, I can't see what else. I guess they could have demanded that Donald Trump be hauled before the International Criminal Court along with Netanyahu and tried for their crimes against humanity. Okay, I guess you could say they cut them some slack in that regard because they didn't demand accountability for the war criminals. But otherwise, this looks very much like a maximalist proposal here. And I have to say that even if nothing comes of this, the mere fact that Donald Trump has said publicly that this is a workable basis for an agreement with the Islamic Republic is in and of itself unprecedented and really extraordinarily humiliating for the empire. Now, one thing that I think must really be understood about this 10-point plan, and I don't see any indication that the Iranians are willing to make major modifications to this plan that benefit the United States or Israel. Not thus far. Maybe they are, but they haven't given any indication of that. This plan has to be complete and utter anathema to Netanyahu's regime and indeed to the entire Israeli political elite. You know, let's just go through it again. If, in fact, Iran is allowed to extract a toll for the passage of vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, then this is going to, as I said, be a huge source of revenue for Iran. And that's revenue that the Iranians could put to use to improve upon and expand their military and intelligence capabilities. And I very much imagine that that's exactly what they would do with a significant part of that revenue. Then the need to end the war against all elements of the axis of resistance. And so therefore, the Israelis would have to come to definitive terms for a lasting peace with Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and the other Palestinian resistance groups, and with Ansarallah. Not something they want to do. This is an entity that has expansionism and conquest in its DNA, and apartheid is written into the DNA of the Israeli state, not just the Likud, but the entire Israeli political elite. this would mean, lasting terms of peace with the Palestinian resistance, a fundamental restructuring of the entity so that it becomes democratic in some form, truly democratic, and accords to Palestinians the right to equality. Otherwise, one cannot imagine how this would lead to a lasting peace. So I think all of that is implicit in this particular demand. The withdrawal of all U.S. combat forces from all bases and deployment points in the region. Can you imagine the horror in Tel Aviv at the notion that they will no longer be protected in the region by a permanent and considerable, multifaceted American military presence? They could never get away with the crimes they get away with if it weren't for all of these U.S. military bases and U.S. assets and intelligence facilities in West Asia. And then full payment of Iran's damages, according to estimates. I mean, we're talking here about tens of billions of dollars, maybe over $100 billion at this stage. Again, this is money that the Iranians could put to use to strengthen their defense capabilities. The lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions, as well as the resolutions of the Board of Governors and the Security Council. If you put all this together, my friends, what you're going to end up with, and I omitted just now the release of Iranian assets, is a regional superpower. That's exactly what Iran would become. Iran is arguably already, even with all the military bases ringing it, all the damage it has sustained, all the sanctions it has had to endure, it is already arguably, except in the category of nuclear weapons, the most powerful state in West Asia. You can be sure, if this plan is realized, or even half of it is realized, that Iran will become firmly ensconced as the most dominant power in West Asia. And that would have, again, existential implications for the apartheid state. Israel would have to undergo a fundamental transformation into a law-abiding member of the regions, of the states within the region, if Iran were to ascend to the position of unchallenged hegemon within West Asia. That's exactly what all of this would entail. So the bottom line is the Israeli political elite must be horrified by this deal. If they think that Trump is serious, maybe they don't believe it. Maybe this is all part of some kind of deception operation by these treacherous, perfidious liars. But if they believe that this actually might be pursued seriously by Trump, I cannot imagine that they're going to sit idly by and let it happen. They're going to do everything within their power to destroy this deal. They might not do it right now. They have, arguably an incentive to lie low to some degree. Maybe they need to take a breath with all the pummeling they've been taking. Maybe they need to reorganize their forces in some manner. Call up additional forces. Maybe there's some short-term tactical benefit to a 2-week ceasefire, and so they're just playing along for the moment. But I cannot believe that they are prepared to sit idly by while this 10-point proposal becomes the terms governing relations between Iran and the United States for years to come. How they're going to undermine this, there's any number of ways that they could do it, including but not limited to false flags, attacking Iran, attacking, viciously brutalizing Hezbollah, the Lebanese people, the people of Gaza again. Not to say that the genocide isn't ongoing. It is ongoing, that's to be sure, but it has been happening at a much lower level of intensity. So they might ratchet up the pressure there. There's any number of ways they could try to tank this deal. And I think you should assume that that's exactly what they're going to do. And then it's all just going to come down to whether or not Donald Trump is finally willing to do what no U.S. president of my lifetime has been willing to do, and that is to use the enormous leverage that the United States government has over Israel to rein it in. All Donald Trump has to do is say, no more military support for you, no more economic aid, no more, military industrial goodies, no more protection at the international institutions. You are on your own, and that would bring the Israeli political elite to heel right quick. Whether or not he's prepared to do that at this stage, I don't know if he's reached that point. I don't know if he'll ever reach that point, especially because the Israelis may well have devastating blackmail material on him. This former bosom buddy of Jeffrey Epstein. Who knows? But he has the leverage. And if he uses the leverage, he can force Israel to abide by whatever terms he and the Islamic Republic agree to. There are reasons to believe that he might do that, including, the withering critique of Joe Kent, this former senior intelligence official who just resigned from the Trump administration, and is openly telling Americans every time somebody sticks a microphone in front of his mouth that Israel is exploiting the United States and that Israel is an enemy of the United States. A poll just came out which showed that 60% of Americans now have an unfavorable view of Israel. 60%. Can you imagine what that number would be if the rapid increase in the price of oil caused the U.S. economy to collapse and people believed it was Israel that brought that about? So Israel's in real trouble. Also, there is a deadline looming for the renewal of the Obama-era military aid agreement between Israel and the United States. That was a 10-year deal for $3.8 billion a year. It was, I think, negotiated just at the end of Obama's second term in 2016. So it is going to expire, I think, this year. Israel is in a very, very difficult spot, and so too is Trump. So who knows? Maybe he's willing to use his leverage. But I'm not quite prepared to believe in it until I see it. And I strongly suspect that the Iranian leadership feels the same way. People may be concerned that Iran seems to be placing trust in the United States and Israel. I don't agree with that assessment. I understand why people might have that impression and be concerned about it. There's nothing stopping the Iranian government from maintaining the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Once it's opened, they could easily close it again. All they got to do, as I've explained previously many times, is blow up a few vessels now and then in the Persian Gulf. They can do this 6 ways from Sunday. They can do it with mines. They can do it with drones. They can do it with missiles, surface-to-ship missiles. They can do it with ship-to-ship missiles. They have submarines, you name it. And these vessels have to pass so close to the Iranian coast, and they are so slow-moving and they are so combustible that that Iran can blow up oil tankers in the Persian Gulf without even breaking a sweat whenever it wants to. And that is the real leverage, the biggest point of leverage that Iran has. So I think that they've learned their lesson in the Iranian leadership. And if, in fact, the Epstein regime yet again violates this ceasefire proposal or engages in some other form of treachery, which I think is likely at this stage, then I think that the all hell is going to come down not on them, on the Iranians, but on the Americans and the Israelis. And hopefully they have finally begun to realize this. A few days ago, I put out a report titled "Why I Stand with the Iranian People." It was the report that I issued, the first report I issued after departing from the country, and it was I did the report from the streets of Hanya in Crete, and I used the phrase in that report that Donald Trump is going to have to pay the piper. I've said that actually numerous times. I started saying this before I actually left Iran, and what I meant by that was the only way to secure the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, for which there is no military solution, is for the Trump regime to make major concessions to the Islamic Republic. And whether or not he's at the point where he's going to do it, he's going to swallow the bitter pill, he's going to pay the piper, I don't know. Again, I'm skeptical that he's there yet. I think he may need to experience a lot more pain before he does that and before he uses his leverage over Israel. But one way or another, he's going to have to pay the piper. One other thing I should mention in passing, by the way, when I was doing my report from Hanya in northern Crete, I was walking around in the old city with a selfie stick, talking into my camera, and a somebody who watches my videos and who formerly worked in military intelligence in the United States tells me that I was being followed in that video and provided to me some guidance to satisfy me that in fact that was the case, and suggested that I take steps to protect myself. I think he's probably right based on what I've seen, but just anybody out there who may be working for some nefarious force, some intelligence agency who's following me, for what it's worth, I'm not at all surprised about this. In fact, I think it just comes with the territory, as do threats to my life, and I've received many of them over the course of the past couple of years. I assure you, and I'm sure that many people in our audience have grasped this by now, that I'm going to continue to do this work. And you can survey me and follow me and threaten me all you want. But I am committed to telling the truth about the crimes of my government and its purported allies. Enough is enough. This is beyond the pale, utterly unconscionable. We have descended as a society here in the West into outright Satanism, in my view. Not the people, but those who speak in our name and who rule over us. And so we will press forward no matter what the obstacles. So in terms of where things currently stand, I want to read to you the statement from Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of Iran. This was issued yesterday, and he said, "On behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran, I express gratitude and appreciation for my dear brothers, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Sharif, and Field Marshal Munir, for their tireless efforts to end the war in the region." I just want to note, how much more diplomatic people are in the non-Western world. The leaders of Iran undoubtedly understand that the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Sharif, he is effectively a vassal of Washington. And we saw that very clearly when they assembled in Egypt at the time they struck up that ridiculous so-called peace proposal for Gaza, where he was just fawning all over Donald Trump in front of the whole world. It was really quite embarrassing. And so they understand that, but they understand also the art of diplomacy and speak respectfully, particularly to diplomats and officials from other predominantly Muslim nations, but not exclusively Muslim nations. And so I wish that our own so-called diplomats learned a thing or two from the leading diplomats of the non-Western world. He continues and he says, in response to the brotherly request of PM Sharif in his tweet, and considering the request by the U.S. for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as announcement by POTUS about acceptance of the general framework of Iran's 10-point proposal as a basis for negotiations, I hereby declare on behalf of Iran's National Security Council, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. So again, let's just try to break this down a little bit. So he clearly is not accepting, implicitly he's rejecting this notion that Iran, went to PM Sharif and asked PM Sharif to communicate to Donald Trump a request to delay the extinction of the Iranian people. What he's saying is there was a request by the U.S. for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, and then came an announcement by POTUS of acceptance of Iran's 10-point proposal as a basis for negotiations. And the two things are dramatically different. I'm not going to get into the 15-point proposal, but they're night and day. And he's saying, look, they basically, they came to us with this thing. We said, no, here's our proposal. And then they just accepted our proposal. There's nothing in here about them having at the 11th hour panicked and said, oh, please give us more time, Donald. So all of that is being implicitly rejected here. Then he says, this is very important, if attacks against Iran are halted. So there's a question here about who's going to get the last shot in. And, Israel always insists, it never really respects ceasefires in any event, but to the extent there's any, pause in the attacks by the genocidal entity, it always insists on having the last shot. Well, I think Iran is saying very clearly here, we're not playing that game. We get the last shot. Or maybe we can have some coordinated, final blows where we both fire at each other at the precise same time. But we ain't going to play that game where you get to have the last shot, Israel. That's not happening. So Israel is going to have to stop firing before Iran ceases what I think it quite rightly calls its defensive operations. They were attacked. They're not the aggressor. Then it says, he says, for a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. So again, nobody's going to get to just, sail through the Strait of Hormuz unaccompanied without any scrutiny by the Iranian military. They're going to have to get the green light from the Iranian military and during the period of the ceasefire. So they're not suggesting, it's very clear to me, the Iranian government, that there's going to be a return to the status quo. That ain't happening. And that is a very, very important concession going forward that could have profound strategic implications, not just for Iran, not just for Israel and the United States, but for all the countries of the Persian Gulf. So let's move on into related news before I conclude the report today. Just to show you how perfidious these Israelis are, this is a report from a resistance Telegram channel that has generally been reliable. An oil refinery on Iran's Lebanon Island and Syria Island docks bombed. The sites located off Iran's southern coast were struck just hours into the fragile U.S.-Iran ceasefire. Probably that was Israel, but I wouldn't put it past the Americans of having done that. I mean, they're also at the leadership level. The United States government is comprised of, treacherous liars. One way or another, this is a clear violation of the terms of the ceasefire, if in fact it happened. And I don't know, I can't confirm that this oil refinery was bombed, but these channels have generally been reliable about these things. And then it states, this resistance channel report, that in retaliation for the U.S.-Israeli strike on Lebanon Island, Iran launched rocket attacks on the UAE and Kuwait, according to Iranian media. So again, they're not going to allow Israel and the United States to have the last shot. This is quite clear. And if they insist on having the last shot, there will be no ceasefire. I think that is, at this stage, written in to the cards. Now, another thing I want to say about this 2-week ceasefire, I've seen some commentary on social media that this may allow the United States and Israel to rearm. Personally, I don't think that's a real concern here. 2 weeks, what can they do in terms of rearmament in 2 weeks? Not a hell of a lot, if anything at all. And by the way, that's a two-edged sword. If during this period, it's not like Iran's military-industrial complex is going to suspend activities. They will continue. Excuse me. They will continue to produce drones, undoubtedly, and to manufacture ballistic and cruise missiles and other armaments during this period as well. So to the extent this allows the United States and Israel to replenish their stocks to a small degree, that would also probably be true for Iran. I don't see a 2-week ceasefire as being, some kind of major concession to the Israelis and Americans, especially on the terms that have been dictated here. What else is going on? Well, this is quite important and very relevant to the prospects of success for the ceasefire. The war criminal Netanyahu says that the ceasefire does not include Lebanon. And around the time that this was, a report today from Al Jazeera, it's been confirmed by Israeli media. And around the same time, resistance channels disclosed that the genocidal Israeli Air Force announced it had carried out the most intense attack in Lebanon since the start of the operation. I think that means since the start of the war on Iran, targeting more than 100 sites within 10 minutes across all Lebanon, Dahia, that's southern Beirut, the capital of Beirut itself, Bekaa, the south, and Hermel. By the way, we've seen this before as a ceasefire. in the final minutes of every ceasefire, Israel goes hog wild and starts murdering people, as many as it possibly can, and just causing as much rampant destruction as it can possibly inflict upon the other party to the ceasefire. So this may actually be an harbinger of things to come. But I suspect that Israel is going to want to keep striking in Lebanon, just as it did on an almost daily basis after the November 2024 so-called ceasefire. And I hope very much that the Iranians are serious when they say that there has to be a ceasefire applicable to all elements of the axis of resistance and not just to Iran itself. One can easily imagine that inside the Israeli military leadership, they're saying to each other, we can much more easily hurt Hezbollah if we don't have to defend ourselves from Iranian attacks at the same time as we are attacking Hezbollah. If we're able to focus all of our firepower and all of our air defenses on the northern border, then we can be more effective in prosecuting our military operations against Hezbollah and the civilian population of Lebanon. So one of the great advantages of the joint military operations that have been carried out by Hezbollah and the Republican guards is that it puts great pressure on the Israeli military, particularly its air defenses, and forces them to be spread thin. So unless the Lebanese resistance is asking, they may be saying to the Iranians, if they feel that they've got Israel on the back foot and they can sustain the pressure without Iran's assistance, they may be saying to the Iranians, we don't particularly care whether the ceasefire applies to us because we want to press our advantage right now. But I don't know what their position is. I haven't seen a position on this put forward by the resistance. What I have seen is this. This was a statement by Hezbollah in the last few hours where, second paragraph, we stand today on the threshold of a great historic victory, which will be realized thanks to the sacrifices of the fighters, the blood of the martyrs, and your unparalleled steadfastness and patience. In these fateful moments, we call upon you to exercise further patience, steadfastness, and waiting, and not to head to the villages, towns, and targeted areas in the south, the Bekaa, and the southern suburb of Beirut before the final official announcement of the ceasefire in Lebanon is issued, because this treacherous and barbaric enemy, which seeks to escape from the image of its defeat, an illusory scene suggesting that it has achieved an accomplishment it could not obtain on the battlefield. And God willing, you will soon return to your villages and homes standing tall, heads held high, proud and victorious as you have always been. I have to say the resistance, they have a real talent for poetry. Just my view. Now, I think what they're referring here when they say may resort to acts of treachery to create an illusory scene suggesting that it has achieved an accomplishment it could not obtain on the battlefield, I think they're referring to the well-known tendency of Israel to go hog wild in the final stages leading up to a ceasefire by killing as many people as possible and destroying as much infrastructure as possible. Now, this might also be an implicit a sign that they anticipate, they may even want the ceasefire to, the implementation of the ceasefire in Lebanon to be delayed so that they can press their advantage against the Israeli military forces. I don't think so. I think they probably would want that ceasefire to apply to them as well. And if in fact that is their desire, I hope and would expect that the Islamic Republic will insist upon this as a condition of entering into a ceasefire itself. And I would also imagine that they are keenly aware, both in the resistance in Lebanon and in the Iranian military, that Israel would very much like to take on Hezbollah without having to worry about Iranian airstrikes at the same time. And in fact, the whole reason why, it's entirely possible that the whole reason why Netanyahu is putting up with this for the time being is precisely to be able to focus all of Israel's military sources on Hezbollah and not have to deal simultaneously with attacks from Iran. That may be why he's temporarily playing ball with this deal. But I don't think I need to explain that to the resistance. I think they probably understand that very well. Now, we've also received a report that in the waning hours of this war, and I don't mean to suggest that it's over because I suspect that it isn't and won't be for some time yet, but nonetheless, reports emerged from Iran that the satanic Israeli military had destroyed a synagogue in Tehran. And there are plenty of videos. I didn't have time to get them on my laptop and share them with you, but I saw plenty of videos in the last few hours of Jewish Iranians lambasting the Israeli government and accusing it of having targeted the synagogue as punishment for the anti-Zionism of Iran's Jewish community. Entirely plausible. I mean, these are people who, the Israeli leadership, they'll kill their own soldiers, in order to prevent them from being taken as hostages. Why wouldn't they kill anti-Zionist Jews in Iran who are making the whole Zionist narrative look like a pile of bullocks, especially at the end of this conflict when they are feeling particularly vengeful for the fact that they have lost. They've had their asses handed to them. So in any event, you may be wondering whether or not it is in fact the case that Israel destroyed this synagogue. Well, wonder no more, my friends, because the satanic Israeli military admitted just hours ago, or yesterday, I should say, that it destroyed the Tehran synagogue, claiming that it was collateral damage in a strike on an Iran commander. And it says it regrets the damage to the Rafinia synagogue. Video from the site shows rescuers handling what looks like book of Hebrew scripture found in the rubble. Wow. Can you imagine what the howls of indignation would be coming out of the halls of power in the corporate media in the West if Iran demolished a synagogue in Israel and then claimed that it was a mistake, it was just collateral damage? Would anybody take Iran seriously? No. But we're expected to take Israel seriously, even though it has repeatedly, intentionally, and gleefully destroyed mosques, gleefully, intentionally, and repeatedly destroyed churches, and done untold damage to Jewish people who have refused to bend the knee to the Zionist entity. So I think that more than likely this was an intentional strike done purely out of spite. Now, things are going from bad to worse inside Israel. I'm going to show you a tirade by an Israeli reporter or commentator from Channel 13, Israel's Channel 13. Just before I start this, he's going off on all the fake promises or the unfulfilled promises that the war criminal Netanyahu has made in the lead up to and during this war. I'm going to read the subtitles for those of you who can't read them and don't speak Hebrew, so I'm going to lower the volume here. Good evening. The Prime Minister boasted he ordered planning for this war over 6 months ago. Here's how the country's critical systems are functioning. The education system doesn't exist. Teachers obviously aren't planning to bring back school days. The healthcare system is cutting back treatments. Not even a budget directive which is issued to let doctors treat patients remotely. One gas rig is down. A second just came back online. 80% of flights from Israel are grounded. Light rail in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem isn't running. Regular trains partially operational. The culture world is dead. The sports world, 3/4 dead. Business compensation laws haven't passed. First reading yet. Money will come in May at best. Key government ministries will lack appointed ministers, and funding for northern defense hasn't been transferred. Sounds like a hell of a mess to me. And certainly some people in Israel think so. And lastly, I'd like to conclude with this little doozy. Mike Waltz was giving a speech in the last day or two to some UN staffers and had some incredibly audacious remarks about the peace president, and watch the reaction that Waltz gets from the staffers.
Chaos, violence, and more unsafe world comes to mind, but if we're being honest, that's also the world that we're living in now, with the UN. So my friends across the street worry that with President Trump's peacemaking,
Did you hear that, folks? They were shouting war criminal, and indeed he is. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Limassol in Cyprus on April 8th, 2026.